Hi, it's Sharon from shinethereader.com. I really thought I was going to be doing Whitney Houston today because I had all her work down that she told me, things she'd said, but in actual fact, as usual, the left hand side of my bed before I got up was Marlon Brando. Now, with Marlon, what I had found was, that sounds so funny, with Marlon, with Mr. Brando, I found that he had given me a lot of stuff, a lot of information of his feelings and his opinions and of who he was as a person. But in actual fact, when he came through today, he simply verified more and amplified more of the same stuff. Firstly, I will say, when he first started communicating, what I was getting was a very whispery, deep, husky voice. Not unpleasant. But as time went on, it became lighter. His voice became lighter. But he's a person who actually seemed to make a point, and it was just said in a natural speaking voice. It wasn't sort of like, this is important or that's important. So bear with me while I go through the different things that he said. He was, and he did say, what you're about to hear may not please a lot of people. So I'm giving you a pre-warning. He also said, don't shoot the messenger. So I'm only relaying the information that came from another person. He said that Black Lives Matter was something that he was looking upon, and he found it disgusting that people of colour, black or brown, have got to take to the streets once again. And he was very clear about this. And this was something that you could feel the passion there. So his opinion was, if you are of a certain nationality, so if you're a British person, if you're an American person, if you're an Australian person, and the list goes on, and you have been born in that country, you have your own nationality. And if you don't feel you have your nationality, you have a problem that belongs to you. So, whilst he was speaking about that, his thing was, I was an American. And from that point of view of being an American, he felt that it is your duty as an American citizen to simply stand up for minority groups. So, to him, it was a contradiction to your own nationality not to be able to embrace other people who need help for whatever reason, in that, they are coming in, they need taken care of, whatever. To him, as an American citizen, it is completely up to you and up to your government to actually embrace those people. And it probably made a lot of sense. That was where he kind of started from. And I did actually see his point of view. It is the knowledge of knowing your nationality. And if you know it, you have nothing to fear. So, Black Lives Matter. Why are they on the street? Why are black people taking to the street? What is going wrong? He said also that what happened in the Civil War would eventually come around again. Because as far as he was concerned, you can only push people so far. And then you're going to have a rebellion on your hands. And no one wants that. He also said that leaders are up and coming, and that every generation that has gone through this have had their leaders. And he says, although you don't see them at the moment, they are rising. And that will cause problems. Because at that point, you're going to find that there is an agenda. They want their rights, which are their rights. And they will not stop until they get them. And he said this can cause a lot of mass upheaval in a country. So his thing was, it should be cut off before it ever reaches that point. People should be able to sit down and not just speak, but listen to each other and embrace each other's cultures as Americans. And if you were a person coming in to America for help, to live there, to work there, that you should be embraced until you actually feel security underneath your feet. The other thing that he pointed out was that leaders across the world at this point in time are actually, he says, there are embers, and there have been embers. He says, but the leaders across the world at this point are actually stoking that fire, and that they're actually putting petrol onto it. They're fueling it for their own end. And he said the end result will not lie with them. The end result will lie with the people. And that's a pretty dangerous position to be in. So there was a lot in his mind about leadership, and he didn't seem impressed with the different leaders that were leading the countries at this moment in time. He also said that if you really look closely at your leaders, it really should tell you what way your country is moving. And if the way your country is moving and it's not rounded and it's not inclusive, then those leaders need to be looked at again and basically let go of, because they're not serving you and they're not serving your country. He said that he himself considered himself an American. He was an American citizen. He was American. And he said he had Irish and Polish blood. But he said as far as he was concerned, he didn't look towards the past to see where he came from, where his ancestors came from. To him, that had nothing to do with it. He was an American citizen. And he never felt that there was anything that would stop that being who he was. Although he considered himself also a member of the universe, a member of the world, a citizen of this world. And from that point of view, his attitude was the same. As a citizen, as a world citizen, the same rules applied. You embrace those who are minorities, who are having a difficult time, who need to be supported. And he says it's entirely up to each individual and then their governments. Because he says you form your own governments. He says so it's really up to every individual to seriously sit and ask themselves, if this be my nationality, what do I need to do to help other people have the same blessings in life as I have had? He said he took great pride in being an American, but at the same time, he could fully understand that there were other groups who were being seriously oppressed. And he said he would always stand up for minority groups and for people who were oppressed. He believes that was the true American way. And then he came off with a few things that was, to me, I mean, he showed me them, so it's easier when you're visualizing something and you're being shown it than it is to actually try and imagine something. But let's go with what he's talking about here. He said, today people are too busy running and hitting. If they actually went into themselves, he said, they would find a very still place to actually look at any situation. And this wasn't Black Lives Matter he was talking about here. He was talking about any situation. He said, go into that part of yourself that is the quiet part, and in there you will find your answers. And those answers will always come out on the peaceful side. It was kind of strange what he showed me, because he did talk me through it, and then while talking me through it, he was showing me it. And he said, if you are walking down the street and you see a leaf, and on that leaf there is a raindrop, and it's just about to fall, or if you're looking at a rose and the first petal has just fallen, does that not bring you to a part of yourself that is very deep, that is very quiet? He says, and I would call that the essence of the spirit, the essence of the soul. He says, you use whatever word you want to use. So his was spirit, essence. I'm the one who's putting in soul there. It doesn't matter what we call it. It's that little space that we all have, that quiet place that resides within us all. He says, this is the part that you need to get to. And until people get there, and until people start to listen, he says, no one will see anything. And it did actually make sense. When he was showing me the leaf, when he was showing me the rose, it really did make sense, because it kind of brought me into that place of quiet that he was talking about. So that was really quite interesting. As regards being a person, I would honestly say I don't think I have ever spoken to anyone who was as intelligent, to the point that perhaps he was too intelligent for me. I think that's a very likely thing. Everything he was given was just off the top of his head. I mean, he wasn't thinking this stuff out. He was just saying it like it was the most normal thing in the world. So I would say that the uniqueness of the person himself was astounding, absolutely astounding. And I have spoken to people who can go very deep, but his depth was it was so lightweight for him, yet to me it was so heavy with intelligence. He said he also thought that the world had lost its sense of humanity, and it saddened him. He said he had been in many parts of the world, and he'd always found beauty. He says there is always beauty to be found, even in chaos, even in madness. So I presume he had travelled a lot. I will say, was I a fan of Marlon Brando's? I respected his work. The only two things I ever saw him in was The Godfather and A Streetcar Named Desire. I can't think of any other movies that I've ever saw him in. But he did impress me. I also thought there was no doubt this was a very unusual man, and also, even though it didn't seem it in A Streetcar, there was something about his looks that was very interesting. This was where he was coming from, and just bear with me because I am reading through a lot of notes here. The other thing he said he had a massive love of children, and it was the innocence of children he loved, and he loved to play with them. And I know in this day and this age, saying something like that can be construed as something like, Jeffrey Epstein. And that was not what he was talking about. He was talking about just basically lifting a child, one of his own children, lifting one of his grandkids, seeing them laughing, things like that. It was the absolute innocence that he really fell for. He says it's just so beautiful because it's untouched at that stage. The innocence is untouched. He said he also loved animals. He had a great affinity with animals. He said, and plants and trees and things that are wild and things that grow and nature. He said, those are the things, he says, that really hold complete beauty because they're untainted, they're completely innocent, and they don't take from anyone. They have nothing going on that's like a bargaining chip. So that was something that he really valued, probably more than anything else. He said if people were to go forward in that area, and what he meant by that area was that space that we talked about, of the leaf and the rose and things like that, then we would be able to sit back and listen to each other respectfully and come from that spirit of a place and then reach a peaceful conclusion that would actually expand the love in the world as opposed to suppress human beings. On film, he didn't talk a lot. He had little to say about movies, actually. It didn't seem to be something he was particularly interested in. He said that he was proud of the films that he did, but once they were over, they were finished, they were done. And after that, he said, basically he turned down a lot of parts that he felt that another person could do better. There came a point, obviously, he says, where you go, yeah, this one I'll take. I'll take it because I need the money. So that was actually his drive, was I'll work when I have to, but it doesn't mean that much to me. It doesn't matter that much. He said one thing was the best director, he said, he ever worked with was Elia Kazan. And he said he was well aware of what Kazan had done and how he had given names. And although he knew that he had done this, you have to kind of look past what a person has done and look at what they're actually doing. Kazan was one of the best directors anyone could ever work with, and he loved working with him. It wasn't as if he'd forgiven him for what he had done, but it was basically, at that point, you have got to give credit to the person who is doing the job really well. And he said there are a lot of great movies coming out now, and he says people just, every generation has its crowd, every generation has its movies. Whilst giving credit to today's film industry, to him still, it was only a movie. It wasn't life. He then became fairly light in his conversation, and I thought this was quite funny. He said, men don't know how to flirt with women. And I thought that was kind of like, where did that come from? Men don't know how to flirt with women, And he said, the thing is, he says, flirtation, he says, is really he said, it's like the fringes and the essence, right? He says, of life at its best. It's like, this is the fruit of life, nothing has to happen But at the end of the day, every man should know how to flirt with a woman. And that wasn't putting a woman down. He says, because, he says, women, even though they may not be interested in the person, in the man, they do like to be flirted with. He says, it makes a woman feel good. He says, and also, women, he says, should also be able to flirt with men. But today, he says, that really seems to be missing. It's something that we should get back to. We should get back to that flirtation, that lightness, as opposed to, oh, we're hanging out. Oh, we're friends. You know, oh, we've just hooked up for the night. He says, it just makes so little of the two human beings involved that at the end of the day, it should be done with a flourish. It should be done with laughter. It should be done with a smile. And he said, you know that look, the kind of only you and the other person know? He says, that is the essence, he says, of flirtation. He says, and I find it sad that people have stopped doing that, and that men and women today, actually, they don't do it at all. So that was kind of like, well, where did that come from? You know, suddenly you're talking about world affairs, and then we're talking about men flirting with women. But that's what he said. He also said that he was not harping back to the old ways and the old days. He says, that's not what I'm doing when I look back. What I'm doing is I'm taking what is respectfully done, how people are respectfully treated, and not that they were before. It was kind of like, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm just simply talking about how people treat each other. You can give a person your word, and you keep your word. And he said there was a lot of generosity in that, generosity of spirit, which seemed to be lacking today. He says now, he says it's all, everything has to be on paper, everything has to be contracted, everything has to be put through this solicitor, everything has to be, he says, and he says it's so technical. You have made it all so technical. I'm not surprised you can't flirt. So there was a little bit of that, and I think maybe he has a point. Although, personally speaking, I probably would be with today's society in the sense that we do need contracts. We do need things wrote down. But then maybe that's because we have seen how it has been abused and taken apart, and how people have basically lost their rights and things like that. And today I think we are all very much into, what are my rights? It's something that we're very attuned to because we have to know them. So it seemed like it was a gentler time for him. Although he did say that, you know, there was many causes he embraced. And those causes that he did embrace, he fully embraced. To the latter, except one, because that involved violence. But as he said, violence will happen if this continues. So he did talk quite a lot, and you did get to kind of know him in a way you don't get to know other people. And maybe because I wasn't asking questions, because he said, this is not an interview. I am not being interviewed. I want to speak, and I want to put my message out there, and I want you to do it. He also said on people's opinions on different things. There he was referring to gay rights, gay marriage, stuff like that there. And he said that, you know, he made no secret of the fact that he was bisexual. He had many relationships. He says they weren't affairs, they weren't one-night stands. He says they were relationships, and very, very, very deep friendships with other men of a sexual nature. And he could not understand that anyone couldn't understand that bisexuality was quite natural. Homosexuality was quite natural. And heterosexuality was quite natural. And one did not delete the other. It's a broad canvas. Don't label, don't push, don't add. Just leave the person alone to flow. It'll flow. And he said he never had any shame with that. And he never tried to hide it. Then he went on to talk about his favourite poet. If you ever read any of Bukowski's work, you will really find that the words that are there are absolutely stunning when you put them together. This is a man who drank too much, in his own way could be quite aggressive. You can't take the words away. He says, and that was beauty. So he went from thing to thing, but for him it was a conversation. This was a conversation. And no, he didn't. I mean, he mentioned somewhere along the line about Oscars, about the studios and stuff like that there, about movies, but he really wasn't, that wasn't his big interest. That was kind of like, you put on your clothes in the morning, that's what you do. If you're working, you go out to work, you work on a movie, you come home. He had no interest in pleasing anyone. He had no interest in pleasing a director. He had no interest in doing something that didn't feel natural in a movie. And he said it did make him quite unpopular at times. But he said, I was always true to myself. He says, there were words I lived by. Be true to yourself. Much, he says, as I have always went for a cause that is for the underdog. When it comes to being true to myself, I don't think I have ever let myself down. So, that's Mr. Marlon Brando. Fascinating character, the depths of which I don't think I personally would be the person to get to, because there was layers, there was so much depth to this man, and this stuff was thought out. I mean, it was so thought out. It was incredible. I actually thought when he first made contact, oh, it's going to be about movies. When in actual fact, everything from the snippets he gave me to begin with to the full blown on, I want this out today. And that was this morning. I've told you what I want. Now I'm going to go over it again with you. I want it out today. That intelligence that he came with, I don't think I've even touched on it. I don't think I've even digested it myself. I honestly don't believe I have. I think it would take you a few days of thinking of what he was actually talking about. And there was a warning. Be in no two minds about that. There was a warning that if the world does not shape up, if people are not willing to sit and listen to each other, open-mindedly listen to each other, then we are going to have a very serious problem on our hands. And I really was impressed when he said, because I'm Irish, I was impressed when he said, your nationality is never something you should question. You never have to question it. All you have to do is embrace it. And then put that embrace out to other people who need. It was a lovely conversation. I think he would have needed someone perhaps who had much more intelligence than I have to do it justice. But I am proud to say that I was the one he gave it to. And maybe he'll give it to other people as well. I don't know. But at least I can say I am better informed today than I've ever been, or have ever been for a long time. It was fresh, it was new, it was real, It just hit every chord that you needed to hear. Well, I did anyway. And so I would just like to say thank you for listening. I hope you got as much out of it as I did. I'm going to sign off as I always do, which is take care of yourselves, take care of each other. I seriously hope you enjoyed it, and speak soon. The next one will be the Whitney Houston one. Okay, take care and God bless. Bye.